Well, I think there's a lot more behind that. I mean, one of the things that I find really like upsetting is the idea that we call human beings consumers. The media, even people whose work I admire will use the word consumers. Consumers think this and consumers want that. And organizations see us as consumers.
Oh,
Um,
really? We're not called passengers now. We're called customers
yes,
on the
yes.
trains. I'm not a customer. I'm a bloody passenger.
Yeah, yeah. And and so once we've started calling people consumers, and then small businesses can't compete with larger businesses, so you have these huge companies that have millions of consumers or subscribers or customers, um, and then they start working on a 95% customer happiness. That's their goal. um that's all very well, but if you're in the 5%, you don't really count. You can't just ring up somebody and say, actually, could you look at me individually, because they've already allowed for a 5% of unhappy consumers. It's just making, I don't think I'm articulating it particularly well. And so that's where, when you stop things being local and you go for this kind of more global consumption system, how can I trust you?
Yep. I'm just thinking now of people who are listening to us. I want to bring back the restorative justice because I think we're kind of having an interesting discussion about some of the reasons and so on.
Mm.
And in the end, it's what can we do? And um, restorative justice. I watched the play Punch.
Yes. Well, we had the mother as a guest, and it was really like, it was just an amazing experience to talk to her.
Yes, how they had to overcome their prejudice and all their conditioning, and it was a big deal. I mean, having your son killed and talking to the killer and helping the killer, and it was like a spiritual experience, really.
So I was recently introduced to a film by Hervé, who's also been a guest on this podcast and a very big friend and peer and colleague of mine. And it was a French documentary film about restorative justice. And it's just been they've just put English subtitles on it. And I really recommend it. So it's called All Your Faces. And what it is, it's a progress through a group of people who, I think they're in prison, who've committed crimes, robbery and assault and things like that, coming together with a group of people who have been on the receiving end of that type of crime. So not necessarily the victim and the offender in the same room. And there's like 8 or 9 of them, and they meet weekly to just talk about it. And you see over the course of the discussions the human connection that builds, and the way there's a natural kind of through dialogue, people who've been on the receiving end of certain crimes holding the people who are saying things accountable. So there's one guy in the circle, for example, who's always blaming everyone else. Oh, it was the circumstances. Oh, it was and he does a whole poor me. And one of the other guys just calls him out on it and just says, I've listened to you for so long, and everything is everyone else's fault. When are you actually going to take responsibility? But out of a natural conversation, not out of some authoritative. And it has such an impact on this guy. I highly recommend it. But it shows that there's a natural justice and we can find it together.
Yeah, that's lovely. I like that. That should be a strap line. And as you were saying that, I was just looking behind you, and I wondered why you'd call things all things conflict as opposed to all things connect.
I think because the work I do, whenever I show up, there either has been conflict, there is conflict, or people are interested in conflict. And so for me, this was a very umbrella way of saying, like, conflict's everywhere and it's in everyone's life some way or another. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think with the work I've done now, I don't see conflict as a bad thing. So for me to say all things conflict, it's like, great, we've got, this is the start of an exploration. This is the start of a place in which we can grow.
I agree with you. And I think temperamentally, maybe you are more tolerant of conflict and maybe conflict averse. But I was just thinking I would have behind me all things connect.
Well, you would do that, Robin.
Well, I said maybe conflict averse. I don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a very big problem in our society, is conflict avoidance and conflict aversion. Because when you live in a punitive system, and when you live in a system of right, wrong, shaming, humiliation, and all the rest of it, and people watching to trip you up, then it's only sensible to be wary of conflict.